Joy was a 60-year-old widow who had lost her husband early in their marriage. She devoted her entire life to raising her only son, Joe, the apple of her eye. From the moment Joe was born, Joy poured her heart and soul into ensuring he had everything he needed. Despite their challenges, to Joy, Joe wasn't just her son. He was her world, her companion and her pride. As the years went by, Joy vowed to herself that when the time came for Joe to marry, she would choose his wife. She believed it was the only way to ensure he had a good and reliable partner. Joy had seen too many women causing chaos in families, and she refused to let that happen to her or Joe. One evening, Joy called Joe into the living room. She had a serious look on her face, and Joe could tell that whatever she wanted to discuss was important to her. "Joe, my child," Joy began, motioning for him to sit. "You know I love you more than anything in this world. Since your father passed, it has just been the two of us. We have shared a bond that no one can break. But now I need to talk to you about something very important." Joe nodded respectfully, although he felt a sense of dread. His mother's tone was unusual stern. "Joe, I don't want you to marry just any woman," Joyce said firmly. "Women these days are unpredictable. My son, some of them come into a man's life only to destroy him or his family. I don't want that for you, Joe. I have seen how some women turn men against their own mothers. That will never happen to me. Never." Joe listened, a frown forming on his face as his mother continued. "I have made up my mind. Joe, I want to choose your wife for you," Joy declared. "I will find the best woman, someone from the church, someone with good character, someone who will respect me as your mother and never cause us problems. I need you to trust my judgment, my child." Joe sighed deeply and shook his head. "Mom, I respect you, but this is the 21st century. Mothers don't choose wives for their sons anymore. Marriage is a lifetime commitment, and I am the one who will live with her, not you. Please, let me make my own choice." Joy's eyes widened in shock. "What are you saying, Joe?" she demanded. "Mom, I have already found someone," Joe said, his voice calm but firm. "Her name is Laura. She's a wonderful woman, and we are deeply in love. We have promised each other forever. I plan to bring her to meet you soon, but I need you to understand that this is my decision." At the mention of Laura's name, Joy's expression darkened. She jumped to her feet, her voice rising in anger. "God forbid," Joy shouted. "You will not bring any idiot into my house and call her your wife. That will never happen. If you dare marry that girl, you will have no peace in this life. Joe, do you hear me? No peace." Joe was stunned by his mother's outburst. He had never seen her this angry before. Feeling frustrated and disappointed, he stood up and walked out of the house without another word. Joyce sat back down, fuming. She couldn't believe her son was defying her. "How dare he speak to me like that?" she muttered to herself. "After all I have done for him, after all the sacrifices I have made, is this how he repays me?" She began to think back to the days when Joe was just a little boy. Did this child even suck this my breast well when he was a baby? She wondered aloud. Because if he did, he would know that when I make a decision, I stick to it. I carried this boy for 9 months, fed him, raised him alone, and this is the thanks I get. Joy's anger grew as she imagined Joe bringing Laura into their lives. "No, I won't allow it," she said to herself. "That girl will never step foot in this house. Joe must marry a woman from the church, someone I approve of. I will make sure of it. Let me see how he will marry that Laura. He won't believe what I will do to her." Determined, Joy began planning how to stop Joe from marrying Laura. In her mind, she was protecting her son and their bond, but in her heart, she wondered if she was pushing him too far. Joe, on the other hand, was equally determined to marry the woman he loved. He knew convincing his mother wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that his happiness depended on standing his ground. It had been weeks since Joe had argued with his mother Joy about marrying Laura. Determined to prove his love and commitment, Joe brought Laura home one day to introduce her to his mother, hoping to ease the tension. The moment Joy laid eyes on Laura, her anger erupted like a storm. Without any hesitation, she screamed, "How dare you bring this woman into my house?" Before Laura could respond, Joy grabbed her by the arm and slapped her hard across the face. "Get out of my house," Joy shouted, dragging Laura towards the door. "You will never marry my son as long as I live." Joe was stunned and furious. "Mom, how could you do this?" he yelled, standing in front of Laura to protect her. "You will regret this, I promise you." Laura, humiliated and in tears, stood silently by Joe's side as he helped her leave. That night, Joe made a decision that would change everything. He and Laura went to their church and secretly got married without informing Joy. The wedding was beautiful. Laura wore a stunning white gown, and Joe's friends came in large numbers to celebrate with them. Joy, however, had no idea what was happening. When she eventually found out that her only son had married Laura behind her back, her anger boiled over. "This boy has disrespected me in the worst way," Joy muttered to herself, "but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. If he thinks he can marry that girl and live happily ever after, he's dreaming." The next day, Joy packed her belongings and moved into Joe and Laura's home without notice. When Joe saw her at the door with her bags, he was not pleased. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Joe asked, already exasperated. "I have come to stay," Joy said with a forced smile, pushing past him into the house. Joe sighed deeply, knowing this would be trouble, but Laura remains polite even as she felt uncomfortable. Joy, however, showed no intention of being a peaceful guest. One night, as Joe and Laura were sleeping soundly in their room, Joy sneaked in with a bucket of cold water. She tiptoed to their bed and without hesitation poured the water all over them. Startled, Joe and Laura jumped out of bed, soaked and shivering. "What is wrong with you, Mom?" Joe shouted. "Why would you do this? I don't want you two sharing a bed under my roof," Joy yelled back. Joe was livid. "Mom, this is my house, not yours. If you ever do something like this again, I will send you back to your house and you will never step foot here again." Seeing her son's anger, Joy immediately began to cry dramatically. "After all I have done for you, Joe, this is how you treat me," she sobbed, falling to the floor. Joe's heart softened at the sight of his mother's crying. He knelt beside her, held her close, and began consoling her. "Mom, please don't cry. I just want peace in this house." But Joy wasn't done. Deep inside, she was already plotting her next move. "Let me teach that girl a lesson she will never forget," Joy thought to herself. The next morning, Joy mixed a strong laxative into a bottle of water and left it on the kitchen counter, hoping Laura would drink it. But as fate would have it, Joe drank the water instead. He spent the entire day running to the bathroom, leaving Laura to care for him. Joy was furious that her plan had backfired, but she didn't give up. That night, while Joe and Laura were asleep, Joy decided to take things to another level. She quietly climbed into their bed and positioned herself between Joe and Laura. Without warning, she defecated on the bed, leaving a disgusting mess that soaked into the sheets and filled the room with a terrible smell. Joe and Laura woke up in shock, their noses wrinkling at the stench. When they realized what had happened, Laura screamed, "This is too much. I can't take this anymore." Joe was speechless, unable to believe his mother had done such a thing. Laura, angrily, packed her bags and stood at the door. Joe, I love you, but I can't live like this, she said, tears streaming down her face. If your mother doesn't leave this house, I will never come back. You can marry her instead. With that, Laura walked out, slamming the door behind her. Joe stood there, torn between his love for his wife and his loyalty to his mother. Joy, on the other hand, smiled to herself, believing she had won, but deep down, Joe knew he had to make a choice, and soon. As soon as Laura walked out of the house, Joy celebrated her victory. She danced around the living room, laughing and clapping her hands. Finally, that foolish girl is gone, she said to herself. I knew it. I trusted my instincts. Now my son can breathe without that useless woman suffocating him. I will find him a better wife, someone who will respect me and my authority. Wasting no time, Joy began scouting for a replacement. She brought home Agnes, a young woman from their church, whom she believed would make the perfect wife for Joe. Agnes, upon seeing how beautiful Joe's house was overwhelmed with joy. Beneath her sweet demeanor, however, Agnes harbored a dark ambition. She had no intention of simply being a good wife to Joe. She was already plotting how to remove Joy from the picture and claim everything for herself. When Joy introduced Agnes to Joe, he was furious. Mom, what is this? Who is this person and why is she in my house? This is Agnes, Joy said confidently. She's a good God-fearing woman and she's going to be your wife. Joe shook his head in disbelief. Mom, I have told you before, you can't force me to marry anyone. As long as this idiot you call Agnes is in this house, you are on your own. And let me warn you, the day I see her in my room, you will both regret it. Joy dismissed Joe's anger, reassuring Agnes, don't worry, my dear, he will come around, just give him time. Agnes smiled sweetly, but in her mind she was plotting Joy's downfall. This old woman thinks she can control everything. Agnes thought, I will deal with her first. Once she's out of the way, Joe will have no choice but to marry me, and this house will be mine. Days turned into weeks, and Agnes patiently endured Joe's hostility while secretly planning her next move. One fateful afternoon, when Joe was out of the house, Agnes saw her opportunity. It was just her and Joy at home. Agnes prepared a delicious-looking meal and laced it with poison. Mother Joy, Agnes called sweetly, I have made your favorite dish. Please come and eat. Joy, pleased by Agnes' apparent kindness, sat down to eat. She didn't suspect a thing as she savored the meal, but moments after finishing, Joy clutched her stomach in pain and collapsed to the floor. Agnes watched as Joy took her last breath, then sprang into action, screaming and crying loudly to alert the neighbors. Help! Somebody help! Mother Joy has fallen, she wailed, tears streaming down her face. When Joe returned home and saw his mother's lifeless body, he was devastated. Mom, he cried, holding her cold hands. What happened to her? Agnes, still pretending to be innocent, said, Oh, Joe, it was terrible. She slipped, hit her head, and collapsed. I tried to save her, but it was too late. Joe, consumed with grief, initially believed her story. He arranged for his mother's burial and mourned her deeply, crying every day as he remembered the bond they once shared. However, as time passed, Joe began noticing inconsistencies in Agnes' behavior. He realized her sorrow seemed more like relief, and her eagerness to stay in his house grew suspicious. One day, Joe confronted Agnes. Agnes, I don't believe you. My mother was strong and healthy. What really happened to her? Agnes stammered, unable to maintain her facade under Joe's intense gaze. He didn't wait for her confession. Furious, he dragged her out of his house and threw her belongings after her. Get out of my house, Agnes, and don't you ever set foot here again. Joe was left alone in his grief, his home empty and quiet. For weeks he mourned his mother, replaying their moments together in his mind. Although he had often disagreed with her, the pain of losing her was unbearable. When Laura heard about Joy's death, she returned to Joe's house. Her heart ached for him, and she couldn't bear to see him suffer alone. Joe, she said softly, I am so sorry for your loss. I know how much your mother meant to you. Joe looked at Laura, his eyes filled with regret. I pushed you away because of her, he said, but even in death, she taught me a lesson I will never forget. From that day on, Joe and Laura rebuilt their life together. Their love grew stronger, and they promised to always communicate and support each other, no matter the challenges. Moral lesson. This story teaches us the dangers of control and manipulation in relationships. Parents should guide their children with love, not force, allowing them to make their own choices. It also warns against greed and deceit, as evil intentions often lead to destruction. True happiness comes from understanding, respect, and the freedom to make one's own decision. Thank you so much for watching the story. Your support means the world to me, and I'm so grateful to have you here. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more engaging content like this, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned and stick around because there's so much more in store for you. Let's keep growing and sharing amazing stories together. Thank you for being part of this journey.